My husband forgot to hang up the call with me, and I heard him telling someone, "Our marriage is awful, but I'm only with her because of her family's money. Stay with me till the end, because what happened after that one call changed everything in my life." My name is Zara Adebayo. I'm 29 years old, Nigerian American, born and raised in Maryland. My family has always been well known. My father, Dr. Adebayo, built a respected medical practice, and my mother comes from a line of entrepreneurs. I grew up surrounded by love, stability, and comfort. Maybe that's why I believed too quickly when I thought I had found love of my own. His name was Darius Coleman. He was 34, tall, confident, and knew exactly how to say the right words at the right time. He grew up in North Carolina, and from the moment I met him at a fundraiser in Baltimore, I was drawn in. Darius had a way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the room. He laughed at my jokes, listened when I spoke, and treated me like a queen in front of everyone. My parents adored him. My friends thought I was lucky. To the outside world, we looked perfect. And for a while, I let myself believe it too. I told myself that his ambition, his charm, his way of fitting in so quickly with my family, it was all genuine. But deep down, even in those early days, there were whispers of doubt. Times when his smile didn't reach his eyes. Times when he seemed more interested in asking about my father's business than about my own dreams. I ignored those signs. I told myself love was enough. I told myself everyone has flaws, and Darius's occasional jealousy or his habit of brushing off my creative plans weren't red flags, just small bumps in a relationship. I thought we'd grow through them together. But that night, the night he forgot to hang up, I learned the truth. I was sitting on the couch in our apartment, scrolling through my phone, when I realized the call hadn't ended. I lifted the phone to my ear, and what I heard made my chest tighten. His voice, so casual, so cold, telling someone else that I wasn't his partner but his ticket. That our marriage was nothing but a business deal to him. In that moment, my entire world cracked. The man I trusted, the man I defended to everyone, had reduced me to a bank account and a last name. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, frozen, with his words echoing in my ears. And right then I knew this story wasn't going to end the way he thought. He thought he was the clever one. He thought I'd never find out. But he had no idea who he was married to. This is where everything truly began. I still remember the night I met Darius like it was yesterday. It was at a fundraiser in Baltimore, one of those elegant events my parents always insisted I attend. The hall was filled with music, laughter, and well-dressed people moving from one table to another. I had just stepped away from a group conversation when a smooth, confident voice said, "You look like you could use some company." I turned and saw him. Tall, sharp suit, a smile that felt practiced yet still managed to pull me in. That was Darius Coleman. From the very beginning, he knew exactly how to charm me. He asked about my interests, laughed at my little stories, and never once looked over my shoulder searching for someone more important to talk to. That kind of attention was rare in those rooms. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers, and I went home with my heart racing like I was 16 again. It didn't take long for my parents to meet him. My father admired his ambition. "That young man has drive," he said more than once. My mother loved his manners, the way he opened doors for me and carried himself with quiet confidence. To them, he was the perfect fit for me, a man who seemed strong, capable, and respectful. He blended into our family gatherings as if he had always been there. My cousins loved his jokes. My aunts thought he was attentive. Every box was checked. But as I look back now, I see the little cracks I ignored. He would compliment my brother's career in finance, but in the same breath make a subtle comment that carried envy. "Must be nice to have everything handed to you," he once muttered after my brother bought a new car. At the time, I brushed it off as harmless jealousy, but now I realize he was measuring himself against everyone around him. The same happened with me. I've always been creative, always dreamed of starting my own design studio. Darius would smile and say things like, "That's cute, babe, but you know art doesn't pay the bills. Focus on something more practical." His words stung, but I told myself he was just being realistic, that he cared about our future. In reality, he was chipping away at my confidence little by little. There were other signs too. His questions about my father's business seemed innocent at first, but they were constant. He wanted to know how investments were managed, how trusts were structured. I thought he was just curious, eager to learn. I even felt proud that he showed such interest in my family's legacy. What I didn't realize then was that he wasn't learning out of admiration. He was studying, calculating. And me? I chose to ignore it all. I told myself I was in love, that love meant seeing the best in someone. I wanted so badly for the fairy tale to be real that I blinded myself to the truth staring me in the face. The wedding was beautiful, almost like a dream. Friends and family filled the hall, and everyone kept telling me how lucky I was. Darius held my hand tightly, kissed my forehead, and smiled like a man who couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life with me. To the outside world, he was the picture of a perfect husband. He helped me greet guests, whispered sweet words in my ear, and danced with me until my feet ached. For a while I believed it too. We settled into married life, and he played the role of the doting partner flawlessly. At family dinners, he pulled out my chair and filled my glass before his own. Around friends, he called me his queen and told stories about how I made his life better. Everyone saw a man who adored his wife. But behind closed doors, things weren't so simple. When it was just the two of us, the softness faded. Small criticisms slipped into conversations. My cooking wasn't seasoned enough, my outfit looked too flashy. My ideas for work were cute, but not serious. He said it with a smile, but there was always an edge underneath. I told myself he was just teasing, but the words left marks I couldn't shake. Slowly, he began steering me toward depending on my parents more than I wanted to. When I suggested we invest together or start saving for a business idea I had, he brushed it off. Why stress when your family has plenty? Let them take care of us while we build our foundation, he'd say. On the surface, it sounded practical, but deep down, I started to feel like he was pushing me into a cage, one made of my family's money. The affection I thought was unconditional began to feel like a bargain. When I didn't agree with him, he grew distant. When I pursued something he didn't value, he acted cold. I found myself working harder to keep his approval, as though his love came with strings attached. Naomi, my best friend since college, noticed the change in me. One night, sitting in her small apartment after a long shift at the hospital, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Girl, he's not in love with your laugh. He's in love with your last name." Her words stung. I laughed it off, told her she was being dramatic, and insisted that Darius just had high standards. But her warning stayed in my mind, no matter how hard I tried to push it away. I wanted to believe I was building a marriage on love, not on contracts and money. I wanted to believe he chose me for who I was, not for where I came from. For months, I silenced those doubts, convincing myself that Naomi was wrong. But deep down, something in me knew the truth. And when that overheard call finally came, Naomi's words echoed louder than ever. She had been right all along. It was a Thursday night, one of those evenings when the city outside seemed too loud, yet my apartment felt too quiet. Darius had told me he was out at a client dinner, something that had become routine. I didn't question it anymore, even though a small voice in my head always whispered that the dinners happened a little too often, lasted a little too late. Still, I tried to push the doubts away. I called him just to hear his voice, just to remind myself he was really where he said he was. When he answered, he sounded distracted. The background was noisy, filled with clinking glasses and laughter. He said, "Hey babe, I'll call you back later. I'm with clients right now." His tone was rushed, but not unusual. We said a quick goodbye, and I thought that was the end of it. But then something strange happened. The call didn't end. I pulled the phone from my ear, stared at the screen, and realized the line was still open. For a second, I thought about hanging up myself, but curiosity held me still. And then I heard his voice. Clear, confident, and cruel in a way I had never heard before. "Zara's sweet, but let's be real. If her father wasn't Dr. Adebayo, I'd be long gone. Marriage is a business decision. Her family money makes it worth it." My chest tightened so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. I pressed the phone closer, hoping I'd misheard, praying it was some kind of twisted joke. But then another voice came through, Reggie Myers, one of his co-workers I had met once at an office party. Reggie chuckled and said, "Man, you really said that out loud?" Darius laughed, a low, careless laugh that cut through me. "Come on, Reggie, you know how it is. Love's nice and all, but stability? That's priceless. Her family name is an asset, not a fairy tale." The words hit me like bricks, one after another, until I felt numb. My husband, the man who held me, who whispered promises of forever, who my family had welcomed with open arms, was admitting that I was nothing but a deal to him. Not a wife, not a partner, just leverage. I sat there in the dark, my phone trembling in my hand, my heart breaking in silence. Tears threatened, but they didn't fall. Instead, something colder settled in. I didn't scream. I didn't call him out. I didn't even hang up. I listened, memorizing every word, every cruel laugh, every truth spilling from his mouth. When the line finally clicked dead, I stayed still. I could have confronted him the moment he walked through the door. I could have demanded answers. But instead, I wiped my face, stood up slowly, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry to him. I wasn't going to beg him to love me. I was going to wait, watch, and plan. He thought he was clever, but he had just handed me the weapon I needed. The next morning, I woke up before him, staring at the ceiling as his steady breathing filled the room. My heart was still raw from what I'd heard the night before, but my face showed nothing. When he finally opened his eyes and smiled at me like nothing had happened, I smiled back. My voice was steady when I asked if he wanted coffee, my touch light when I kissed his cheek. Inside, though, I was burning. I decided right then that if Darius thought I was blind, I would let him keep believing it. I played the role of the devoted wife perfectly. I laughed at his jokes, sat beside him at family dinners, and held his hand when we went out in public. Behind that mask, my mind worked nonstop. I couldn't unhear his words. He was using me, and now I had to know just how deep his betrayal ran. I started small. While he showered, I checked his wallet, his drawers, his briefcase. Nothing obvious. But Darius wasn't careless. He was too proud of his cleverness to hide everything in plain sight. So I went digital. I logged into our joint account late at night, scrolling through statements with a cold, shaking hand. That's when I noticed transfers, small at first, then larger, bleeding into an account I didn't recognize. Tracing the credit card bills gave me more. Hotel charges I had never heard about, dinners that didn't match the schedule he told me, and payments labeled as business expenses to names I didn't know. But one name appeared again and again, Tobias Green. His cousin. I remembered Tobias from our wedding. Loud, flashy, the kind of man who bragged about hustling, but never seemed to hold a real job. My parents didn't care for him, and I had quietly agreed. Darius always defended Tobias, saying family sticks together. Now, staring at those transfers, I saw the truth. Darius wasn't just preparing to leave me emotionally. He was preparing to leave me financially secure in his own way, with money funneled into whatever shady scheme Tobias was running. He was building himself a cushion, a safety net, so when he finally decided I wasn't useful anymore, he could walk away rich. I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection staring back at me from the dark screen. My hands were trembling, but my face was calm. I knew if I confronted him now, he would twist it, gaslight me, make me look paranoid. No, that wasn't the way. So I went back to bed, slid under the covers, and rested my head on his chest when he returned from the shower. He kissed my forehead, completely unaware of what I had just uncovered. I whispered good morning, my voice gentle, my smile soft. But inside, I was no longer the same woman. I wasn't his sweet, blind wife anymore. I was a storm, silent for now, but gathering strength. And when it finally broke, Darius would never see it coming. It was a small piece of paper that changed everything. I found it tucked between the pages of one of Darius's books, a receipt from a luxury hotel in D.C. The date caught my eye first. It was the same night he'd told me he was in a late meeting with clients. At first, I told myself it could be business. But the room number was written in his handwriting, circled like a secret note to himself. No one writes down a hotel room number for a work dinner. I held the receipt in my hands for a long time, my stomach twisting. Betrayal had already poisoned my heart, but this was different. This wasn't just about money or manipulation. This was intimacy stolen and shared with someone else. I felt the fury rise inside me, but I didn't confront him. I knew better now. If I wanted the truth, I needed to see it with my own eyes. So the next week, when Darius said he had another late meeting, I followed. My pulse hammered as I drove into the city, parking my car a block away from the hotel listed on that receipt. I wrapped my coat tighter around me and sat in the car, watching the glowing entrance. Hours felt like minutes as I waited, every shadow that passed making my breath catch. And then I saw him. Darius stepped out of a sleek black car, his suit perfectly pressed, his smile wide. But he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, laughing softly as he placed his hand on the small of her back like he used to do with me. She was younger, with long brown hair and a figure that caught attention easily. I recognized her immediately, Elena Brooks, the paralegal from his office. I'd met her once at a firm dinner. She'd been polite, even sweet, and I never thought twice about her. Now I understood why he always spoke highly of her, why his phone lit up late at night with work emails. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded, but it wasn't from sadness. It was rage, cold and sharp, settling deeper than tears ever could. Watching them walk into that hotel together, I felt something inside me harden. He thought he was clever. He thought he was steps ahead, juggling lies and building a future without me. But he had no idea who he married. I sat there until the sight of them disappeared into the lobby. My chest burned, but my mind was clear. This wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of something much bigger. He believed he could break me quietly, walk away rich, and live happily ever after with his affair. What he didn't know was that every lie he told, every secret he tried to hide, was another weapon in my hands. And I was ready to use them all. The day after I saw Darius walk into that hotel with Elena, I woke up with a new kind of strength. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I wasn't going to waste tears on a man who saw me as a business deal. If he thought he could play with my heart and my family's name, then he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I called Mr. Adewale Thomas, my family's attorney. He had been with us for years, trusted like an uncle, someone who knew every detail of my father's estate and how the Adebayo wealth was structured. When I sat across from him in his office, I didn't cry or ask for pity. I laid everything out, the overheard call, the shady money transfers, and now the affair. He listened silently, his sharp eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said calmly, "Then we must protect what is yours, Zara. Starting now." Over the next few weeks, we worked quietly, moving pieces one at a time like a chess game. Accounts were restructured so that Darius's name was removed or rendered powerless. Trusts were altered, investments were shifted, and assets he thought he could one day claim were secured tightly beyond his reach. On paper, everything looked normal. To him, nothing seemed to have changed. But behind the scenes, the castle he thought he was slowly taking over had locked its gates forever. All the while, I played my role at home. I cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his tired jokes, and asked about his long days at the office. He would smile, distracted, too confident in his lies to notice the storm building around him. He thought he was juggling everything so well: his secret bank transfers, his cousin's shady ventures, and his affair with Elena. In his arrogance, he never once suspected that I was the one watching, listening, and pulling strings in silence. Some nights, I lay beside him while he slept, his phone buzzing quietly on the nightstand with messages he thought I didn't know about. I would glance at his face in the dim light, wondering how he could rest so easily while plotting to betray me. But instead of anger, I felt calm. Because for the first time, I was ahead of him. Each time I left Mr. Thomas's office, I felt lighter, stronger. My family's wealth was safe, my independence was intact, and Darius was unknowingly standing on a trapdoor. He thought he was preparing to walk away rich and untouchable. He had no idea that when the time came, he would leave with nothing. At home, I kissed his cheek and played the dutiful wife. In reality, I was setting the stage for his downfall. And the best part was, he never saw it coming. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and polished marble, a scene that looked plucked straight from a dream. Zara moved through the crowd like a queen in her element, her sequined gown catching every flicker of light. On the surface, she was the picture of poise and grace, the devoted wife hosting yet another Adebayo charity gala. But beneath the calm mask, her heart thrummed with the rhythm of long-awaited justice. Tonight wasn't just about raising funds. Tonight was about ending a lie. Darius arrived late, as expected, wearing the same smug smile he saved for public appearances. On his arm was Elena Brooks, the paralegal who thought she was stealing a husband and gaining a future. Zara caught Naomi's sharp glance from across the room, and in that silent exchange, she felt her courage harden. Everything was in place. The speeches began, laughter swirled, champagne glasses clinked. Zara let the night breathe until anticipation hung heavy. Then she stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, her voice clear and unwavering. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. As you know, transparency is at the heart of everything we do here, which is why tonight I'd like to share some truths." The projector screen behind her flickered to life. Bank statements appeared, transfers from their joint accounts into the so-called business venture with Tobias Green. The crowd murmured. "My husband," Zara continued smoothly, "has been preparing for a future without me. He thought I wouldn't notice. But I did." The next slide showed hotel receipts. Late nights at a luxury suite in D.C., signed with Darius's own name. Gasps rippled through the audience, eyes darting toward Elena, who shrank in her seat. Zara's smile never faltered. "And here," she added, pressing a button, "is what he thinks of his wife." A recording played. Darius's voice, casual and cold. "Our marriage is awful. I'm only with her for the money. She's nothing without her family's wealth." The words hung in the air like poison. Some guests covered their mouths in shock, others shook their heads in disgust. Elena bolted, heels clattering across the marble, leaving Darius exposed and alone. His face blanched as he stammered, "Zara, what are you?" She cut him off with a hand, her tone ice. "What I'm doing is ending this charade." She held up a folder. "These are the divorce papers. Already filed. You've also been removed from every account you thought you controlled. And as for that little scheme with Tobias..." Another slide lit up, documents linking the investment to fraud under investigation. "The authorities have copies." The room erupted, whispers, pointed fingers, judgment thick as smoke. Darius's mask of confidence shattered, leaving only desperation. Zara stepped down from the stage, head high, as applause began, not for him, but for her courage. The man who once mocked her as powerless now stood stripped bare, reputation crumbling in real time. Zara didn't look back. She didn't need to. The storm she unleashed had already consumed him. The night after the gala, the house that once echoed with false promises felt unnervingly quiet. Darius stood in the doorway of Zara's study, his tie loosened, his face pale with the kind of panic he couldn't disguise anymore. For once, there was no audience to impress, no mask to hide behind. Just him, small, cornered, and desperate. "Zara," he began, his voice cracking like old glass. "Please. I know I messed up. I was under so much pressure, work, bills, expectations. The affair, the money transfers, it wasn't about you. It was about stress. About survival." He moved closer, hands trembling. "I never stopped loving you." Zara lifted her gaze from the papers on her desk, her eyes cold and unflinching. She had spent too many nights crying into pillows, too many mornings forcing a smile for the world while her marriage hollowed out behind closed doors. And now, when the mask had fallen, he wanted forgiveness. She stood, straightened her blazer, and walked toward him with deliberate calm. "You wanted an investment, Darius?" Her tone cut sharper than glass. "Congratulations. It just went bankrupt." He flinched as though struck. "You don't mean that. You can't mean that." His voice turned pleading, then angry. "I gave you years of my life. You can't just throw me away like trash." Zara's lips curved into a humorless smile. "You gave me years of lies. And now you're standing in front of me because you lost access to money, not because you lost me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Darius's face hardened, but his bravado crumbled just as quickly. He turned away, pacing the room, muttering curses under his breath. Finally, he grabbed his coat and stormed out, the sound of the door slamming reverberating through the house. That was the last time Zara saw him standing tall. Word spread fast. His cousin Tobias was arrested for fraud, and Darius's name was tied to every shady deal. Former friends stopped returning his calls, colleagues distanced themselves, and even Elena abandoned him when the money dried up. His once polished reputation drowned in whispers of scandal and failure. Meanwhile, Zara moved with quiet dignity. She attended board meetings, walked into charity events alone, and reclaimed her life without the shadow of his arrogance trailing her. She no longer wore the mask of the doting wife. She wore the armor of a woman who had survived betrayal and risen stronger. Naomi often reminded her, "Girl, you didn't just leave him. You reclaimed yourself." And it was true. Zara hadn't merely won revenge. She had won back her independence, her voice, her dignity. As for Darius, the man who once mocked her as nothing without him now lived in a cramped apartment, drowning in debt, with no allies left to call. And Zara? She stood taller than ever, proof that betrayal could break hearts but also build unshakable strength. The city lights twinkled below as Zara leaned back in her chair, the cool night air brushing against her skin. For the first time in months, she felt her chest rise and fall without the weight of dread pressing down on it. The nightmare was over, but the scars it left behind were still tender. She swirled the wine in her glass, watching the crimson liquid catch the glow of the balcony lights. Naomi kicked off her heels and sank into the chair beside her, sighing as if she had carried the entire journey too. "Girl, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Everything he put you through, and the way you turned it all around." She shook her head, sipping her drink. "That wasn't just survival. That was strategy." Zara let out a soft laugh, though her eyes stayed fixed on the skyline. Strategy born out of betrayal, she said quietly. You know, it almost destroyed me. There were nights I couldn't breathe, nights I wondered if it was me, if I had done something wrong. But in the end, she took a long sip, her voice steady. In the end, revenge rebuilt me. Naomi tilted her head, studying her. And would you do it again? All of it. The silence, the planning, the public blow-up. Zara thought for a moment. The memories came back sharp. The overheard phone call, the gut punch of realizing her marriage was nothing but a business arrangement to Darius, the sting of seeing him walk into that hotel with Elena. Each moment had cut her open, but each cut had forced her to grow steel where there had once been softness. I wouldn't glamorize it, she admitted. It was painful. Ugly. There's nothing pretty about tearing yourself apart just to rise from the ashes. But it was necessary. For me. For my dignity. The two women sat in silence for a while, the hum of the city filling the space between them. Naomi broke it with a mischievous grin. So, she said, raising her glass, what do we call this? Revenge. Zara finally turned her head, smirking. Her eyes glimmered not with bitterness, but with the clarity of someone who had finally reclaimed control. She clinked her glass against Naomi's and replied, No, just business done right. They laughed, the kind of laugh that only comes when the storm has passed and the skies have cleared. Below them, the world kept spinning, unaware of the quiet triumph unfolding on that balcony. For Zara, there would be no fairy tale ending with roses and reconciliations. There was only strength, closure, and the knowledge that she had survived the fire without letting it consume her. And as she sipped the last of her wine, she realized that was more than enough. Do you think Zara made the right choice by cutting Darius off completely, or should she have given him another chance? Share your thoughts down in the comments. I'd really love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next.